It has officially been a year since the release of AEW Fight Forever, and in those last 365 days, the game has completely died. In fact, the game died very quickly after its release, and despite numerous attempts to do so, was never able to recover, and as of June 2024, the daily player count has stayed stagnant. So, how did this happen? How did a game that was hyped and teased for the better part of 2 years as much as AEW Fight Forever be such a failure of a delivered product, and how did the game that people thought would save the wrestling games genre end up being such a disaster? Today, we discuss it all, from the initial announcement of the game, the build up to release day itself and all its updates, and everything leading up to the full game that we have now, for the ultimate AEW Fight Forever retrospective. Like the video, and let's get into it. AEW officially formed in January 2019, and they'd hold a few pay-per-views that year before their debut of their TV show AEW Dynamite in October of that same year. And leading up to their TV arrival, AEW had already spoken about and expressed interest in a possible AEW video game, however, it wasn't obviously going to come immediately. Regardless though, the current state of wrestling games was not looking good, and it was a good time to be looking at releasing a wrestling game, as WWE 2K20 had of course just dropped around this time in what is seen by a lot of people as the worst wrestling game of all time, mainly because the game was full of stuff like this.
There's the mat slam.
WWE 2K had stopped working with their main developer Ukes, meaning that they had to rebuild the entire engine from scratch in just a year, and obviously you saw what we got with WWE 2K20. With the potential AEW video game, it was pretty much just going to be a waiting game, as it was understandable they weren't going to release a game as they had only just formed as a company recently, but people waited with eagle eyes, and it wouldn't be until November of 2020 when the wrestling games community would get a big announcement from AEW. As the AEW Games YouTube channel was started, and on the 2nd of November, they announced that an AEW Games special event would be taking place on the 10th of November, and fans awaited with excitement with the expectation of an AEW game announcement, and that's what they would get and then some, as Kenny Omega in a turtleneck would present a teaser trailer for the game, and this was very exciting to see and also surprising to see, as fans weren't expecting this much content to see early on of the game. And with yet another disappointing 2K release with WWE 2K Battlegrounds that had just come out, and the announcement that there wouldn't be a WWE 2K game the next year, it was once again the perfect time for this game to release, and fans were desperate for a new wrestling game. The livestream also announced that AEW were working on mobile game projects, but we don't need to talk about those, maybe that's a different video. And the big announcement in the teaser trailer was that the ex-WWE Games developer Ukes would be helping to develop AEW Fight Forever, and as well as that, the game would be inspired by WWF No Mercy, and the director of No Mercy was helping with the AEW game as well. AEW Games would continue to post small updates on the game for the next few months, but they were mainly focusing on AEW Elite GM and showcasing everything around the release of that game, and it wouldn't be until June of 2021 when we would see the next big update on AEW Fight Forever, when the first bit of gameplay was released featuring a first look at Darby Allin. And for early gameplay, it looked pretty good, and the gameplay received positive feedback from viewers in the comments who were impressed by how the game was coming along in its early stages. And then 3 months later in September, gameplay with Jungle Boy would be revealed as excitement and hype for the game continued, and hype would increase even more when that same month it was announced that Owen Hart would be part of the game's roster and would be a playable character in his first video game appearance since 2004, which was a huge deal. Then fast forward to April 2022 as development continued, and finally a name for the game was announced when on the April 21st Dynamite tapings, AEW owner Tony Khan revealed the name of the game to be AEW Fight Forever, which many had already figured was the game's title as there had been trademark filings a month prior, and this title was formally announced the next month with gameplay featuring Chris Statlander and Nyla Rose also dropping as well as hype continued to build. Then in June, Kenny Omega announced that the game was set to come out at the end of the year. Spoilers, this of course didn't happen, and we'll get to why. In August, we'd see a lot of new stuff for Fight Forever as a teaser came out confirming THQ Nordic as the publisher, as well as full match gameplay being released for the first time, and content from Gamescom being posted around as well, as AEW Fight Forever started showing the game off at conventions. And it seemed like AEW Fight Forever was a near complete game. However, while all this was going on and fan excitement was ramping up, reports came out in the background that AEW and Yuke's were butting heads over the game. Supposedly, the game was way over budget and required even more extra investment, and a lot of originally planned features were being cut. Nobody really paid attention to these reports at the time, and they just kinda went by in the background like I said. Maybe people should have paid attention to these reports. The official trailer was finally released in November, airing at the Full Gear event, and surely now we weren't too far off this game being released. But after this, things went a bit silent for the game. Despite an end-of-year release being aimed, it looked as though we definitely weren't getting that. And this was supposedly due to GCW, another wrestling company if you weren't aware of them, opposing the Fight Forever trademark, as they had filed for the trademark of the same term a few months after AEW did, having ran a show under the same name a few years prior, and some extra time was needed before release of the game so that the two companies could negotiate a way to both legally use the name Fight Forever. Finally though, in May of 2023, AEW Fight Forever's release date was finally revealed, as it was announced that it would be releasing on June 29th, 2023. More gameplay would be released showcasing the various game modes such as the mini games and the exploding barbed wire deathmatch, alongside more roster announcements. Content creators also started dropping gameplay, showcasing all the crazy weapons that can be used in matches, helping to hype the game even further until finally, release day. June 29th came round and fans rushed to download and buy AEW Fight Forever and get their first impressions, and the first reviews would come in, and they all kinda said the same thing. Right from the very get-go, the big complaint of AEW Fight Forever was that there simply just wasn't enough content. While there was a decent amount of match types, the game just wasn't fleshed out enough and lacked a good story mode. The Road to Elite mode was meant to act as that story mode, and while it was definitely playable, it was way too short and could be completed in just a couple of hours, and while this mode was advertised to have good replay value and the ability to take different parts, the mode just simply wasn't compelling enough to get players invested and wanting to replay it. As well as that, the mini games were a completely pointless addition to the game. To this day, I think I played about 3 of them, and I knew nobody that took the time to actually play these minigames when this game first dropped. And the Creation Suite, oh boy, don't get me started on the Creation Suite. Just an absolute disgrace and completely unfinished aspect of the game. It was completely bare bones and was a farce compared to any WWE game's Creation Suite, and a lack of community creations combined with how basic the Creation Suite was meant that the lifespan of this game had just been severely lowered. The only decent thing about the game was the gameplay itself and how the game looked, and even that had its fair share of problems. For one, while the game looked alright and the gameplay was decent like I said, it didn't look too different from the gameplay previews that had been shown more than a year before, which makes you wonder what they were even doing in development. And as well as that, the game had a lot of glitches and exploits that weren't patched quick enough, which led to the online competitive scene for the game to die off completely, which was a shame as there was actually a decent sized community for that when the game first dropped, but their failure to address gameplay issues in time meant that they lost those players forever. What also didn't help matters is that WWE 2K23 had just dropped a few months prior to very good reviews in potentially the best WWE 2K game yet, and people would just much rather play that. I mean, why wouldn't they? The gameplay was better, the game was more extensive and had more to do in it, and the Creation Suite was light years ahead of Fight Forever and had far more replay value as a game. AEW Fight Forever's player numbers went stagnant after just a couple of weeks, and it was really no surprise. People simply got bored of the game after weeks quickly because they ran out of things to do, and the lack of communication and patches from the game only worsened matters. They would release their first big content update in late August that featured the brand new Stadium Stampede mode, which was AEW Fight Forever's take on a Battle Royale mode. And this game mode, when it dropped, was actually quite enjoyable and really fun. I actually made a video playing it when it first came out, but unfortunately, while it was good, it once again just wasn't enough, and there wasn't enough variety in the game mode to keep players coming back, and within just a couple of weeks, any Stadium Stampede lobby you joined would just be full of bots, and in any game you joined, you were literally the only real player. Something that was found out upon release also is that AEW Fight Forever would be operating under the Season Pass model, with each Season Pass including 3 characters, as well as other items such as arenas, more minigames, and more items to use in the Creation Suite, but still not enough, and these Season Passes usually go for just $20 plus, not much or anything. An absolute rip-off, and I think many fans were of the expectation that the additional characters in the game would be free DLC, but alas, no. Just no, said AEW Fight Forever. In the year that AEW Fight Forever has been out, there has been 4 season passes with 4 arenas and 16 playable characters added to the game, which yeah, I guess it's okay amount of content, but it's nowhere near enough content to keep anyone invested in the grand scheme of things. Like, nobody is coming back to this game to use a character that plays near the exact same as a dozen of the other characters in the game. To keep players coming back, AEW Fight Forever needed good solid game modes and just more stuff to actually do in the game itself. Stadium Stampede was a good start, but guess what? There was no updates or changes to it for nearly a whole year, and it took them that same amount of time just to add a basic ass tournament mode to the game. A whole year just for a tournament mode. Like, it's just hopeless. Nobody is waiting around that long for a basic game mode that you can get in any other wrestling game from the day it's released. And the fact that all the season passes total about $100 for all of it is a complete scam. $100 for some characters and maps? Give me a break. Not to mention, half the stuff they release is outdated. I'll never forget them having Timeless Toni Storm promote her DLC for her new character of her year-old gimmick. The character she's promoting literally looks nothing like her. Heck, to this day, they still don't even have a Collision arena. That show has existed for over a year now. But hey, you can also just spend $100 on the AEW Fight Forever Ultimate Edition, which includes everything I just mentioned and is just as big of a rip-off. There is no universe where this game should cost anything more than $15, let alone $100. But this kind of brings us to where we are now. The 4 season passes have been released, with season 4 supposed to be the final season of the game, meaning I guess the game is complete? And I say complete with air quotes you can't see because it sure doesn't feel like it. It's been a whole year and the game still feels just as unfinished as when it did when it first dropped. And it still just doesn't look any different to the previews that we saw for the game literally months after the game's announcement. How does that happen? AEW Fight Forever was just an overall disaster. Pre-release was filled with clashes between AEW and Ukes, as well as opposition from GCW, and when the game finally did get released after 2 years of hype, it did not meet anyone's standards, was completely overshadowed by WWE 2K23, lost all its player base in a week, and lost their trust to ever return to the game by charging extortionate prices for basic DLC, and the game just never recovered. And the game will just never recover, and after charging full retail $70 price for the game for a whole year, the game can now be found for free as June's PlayStation Plus game. You've got 1 day left to go get it for free if you'd like, but I doubt anyone is rushing. That's it from me. This will probably be my final AEW Fight Forever video, a big long retrospective on the entire history of the game. I hope you will enjoy this video. AEW Fight Forever is a complete disaster. Like the video if you do agree with that, and subscribe if you want to see more wrestling content in the future, and turn those notifications on to be the first to see it. I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye, and keep on rolling.